So good day, everyone, for joining us today. By the way of introduction, my name is Samuel Falani Bello, the co-founder of Sour Concepts. Today, we have in our midst an relevant, my boss, my mentor. I've known Dr. Said for more than a decade as my mentor, who has inspired me in many ways. So it's a pleasure to have him with us this morning and also this afternoon or evening, wherever we are joining. So today we are going to talk about mastering research proposal development for graduate studies. This is important because we might need to write a research proposal or answer some research questions for our graduate study application, and this might also be beneficial to someone who is navigating a postdoctoral opportunity. So before I give the mic to Dr. Said, this webinar is hosted by Sour Concepts. We are out there to help people to navigate the study abroad opportunities in terms of how to position yourself for opportunities, how to build your profile, and how to be well-oriented in terms of opportunity out there. There are a lot of opportunities out there, but we have to be well-positioned for that. So today, I have with me Dr. Said Olaide Jima, aka Confidence. That was his name. He's once the president of our College of Animal Science and Livestock Production, and that's when I know my boss. So currently he's a postdoctoral associate in the Macari Lab at Rice University in the United States of America. He holds a Bachelor of Agriculture in Pasture and Range Management and a Master's in Agriculture and Pasture Production and Utilization from the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, FUNAB, Nigeria, as well as a PhD in Utilization and Conservation of Grassland Resources from the Institute of Grassland Research, that's the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Science, CAS, in Beijing. Is one of the prominent research institutes across the world. And I think it's the leading research institute in China and ranked among the 10 in the whole world. He previously completed an MCOR postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Botany at the University of Miami, am I right, where he focused on below ground grassland ecology. If you have been following Dr. Said, you'll be seeing him working around different below classes in terms of playing with them, making some research findings from it. His research spans functional ecology, community ecology, below ground ecology processes using experimental, observational, and modeling approaches. He applies trade-based framework to understand how above and below ground plants trade influence ecosystem functions. In this webinar, he will guide participants through the essential of mastering research proposal development for graduate study. He will break down how to identify strong research problem, structure compelling proposals, align ideas with funding and supervisor expectations, and build clear, feasible research frameworks that stand out in competitive graduate application. And one thing is, I need to add is, in 2020, during the COVID, Dr. Said completed his PhD and he was going back to Nigeria. But fortunately, there was flight restriction across the world. He flew down to Guangzhou, where I was doing my PhD then. We met and he gave me some insight, and truth be told, that insight really assisted me with other mentorship I received from other people to finish my PhD within 3 years. And one thing is, it's not only about just giving me that stuff. He served me one, even though he came to my city, but he still served me one African delicacy. I always remember that. And that was at around Guangzhou Railway Station. Thank you for those time. And also he has been my mentor for a long time. And today we are having him in our midst. And when one of his mentees saw our fly, said, "Oh, you guys, you caught the elephant." Like we catch the elephant to be our speaker today. And that person is one of his mentees who just completed his PhD from the United Arab Emirates. I know he knows the person I'm talking about. So please join me to welcome Dr. Said Olaide as he speaks to us on how to master research proposal for graduate studies. You are welcome, my boss, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Even though it looks like you have amplified it, I always like to stay on a low key, as usual. But we thank God for whatever impact we have been able to make. Am I audible, please? Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. Can you all see my screen, please? Okay, thank you. That nodding is particularly helpful. Thank you. All right, just gonna keep this here. Okay. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are joining us from. Again, my name is Said Olaide, and I'm a postdoc at Rice University presently. Today, I'll be speaking with you about the topic Mastering Research Proposal Development for Graduate Studies. And I also want to appreciate Sao Concept for inviting me to speak with the audience. So let's dive in. But before we go into everything, this is just a little, information about me, which also involves many of the things Dr. Bello has already mentioned. So I'm not going to, spend time on that. So today we're going to be looking at what a research proposal is. How do we develop a research proposal? Looking at the various sections that, we can actually leverage on while developing our proposal. We'll talk briefly about methodology. We'll dive into project feasibility and how that is important in our proposal. Then we'll talk about a little bit about strategic alignment. And finally, we're going to do a recap to see whatever we've been able to learn. Permit me to say that I would like to make the session a little bit more interactive. So I would be happy if you can use the chat box to provide some some responses, and that would be very appreciated. So let's dive into the session proper. So when we talk about a research proposal, what are we referring to? I believe we all know a research proposal, and we have probably written one, or we've seen one written. But just for the sake of this session and for simplicity, we will refer to a research proposal as a formal document that outlines the background, the questions, and methods for conducting a planned research. Ideally, we do not come up with a research proposal unless we are trying to conduct a research. So it is expected that this proposal tells us a little bit about the background. It tells us a little bit about the questions. We look at what methods are we going to use to implement whatever research we are proposing to do. So basically, that is what a research proposal is. And it's also important to point out here that the format for writing a research proposals can actually vary from one organization to the other. So I don't want to believe that there's a streamlined or a one-way traffic to writing this. No, but instead, if you depending on where you're applying to, or depending on the purpose of writing the research proposal, you should try to follow the format that is provided. But irrespective of whatever format you're following, I believe that many of the things we are going to talk about today will be very relevant in developing your proposal. Now, proposal development is something that is good. At least it helps us show ourselves that we are able to conduct a research. But before we are able to develop a proposal, something must come before that. And that is the fact that we must have been able to generate ideas. And it's important to distinguish here clearly that research conceptualization, which actually lead to the generation of ideas for research, is actually different from our proposal development. So in research conceptualization, you're trying to come up with, research ideas that you can actually build upon to be able to, write a proposal. But for the purpose of this session, we are going to focus on the proposal development. So we are not talking about the conceptualization of the ideas. But it's important to let us know that that actually comes first before you are able to write a proposal. So what I'm saying in essence is that you don't just wake up one day and be like, yes, I want to start writing a proposal. No, there must be 1, 2, or 3 ideas that you have about conducting a research that will motivate you to now be like, okay, now I want to write a proposal about these ideas. And it's after you write those ideas, you transform them into a proposal that you can now go ahead and submit the proposal to maybe a professor or admission committee or whichever organization you are interested in submitting the proposal to. However, let me leave you with this very early quote that without a compelling idea, how can you write a good proposal? So which means that if you have to write a proposal, make sure you have a very good idea, that you'll be able to, articulate so that you can have a very good proposal. And on the second layer, if you don't have a good proposal, how can you spark the flame of scientific inquiry? Because the essence of writing a proposal is like, hey, I want to, ignite a flame of inquiring something about a particular research niche, and that definitely requires having a good proposal. Okay, now we have talked about what a proposal is. I think the next thing that should come to your mind before you go ahead to develop your proposal is who will read my proposal, because the person that is going to read your proposal or the committee that is going to evaluate your proposal will go a long way in determining how you are going to format your proposal. So number one, are you applying to a particular research lab where when you write this proposal, it's going to be reviewed by a potential professor who is a PI, which means principal investigator. Now, if this is the case, then you want to be very clear about the novelty of whatever you are putting on the table. Interestingly, we all know that professors are very busy these days. So if a professor has asked you to write a proposal, then you need to see that as an opportunity to gain entrance into the lab, and you need to take that opportunity seriously by making sure that you craft a proposal that is, presentable and that is very clear and doable. So some of the things you want to pay attention is to number one, the so what of your research. Why should the professor even care? So which means there must be a novelty statement in your research, in your proposal, that would let the PI know that yes, this proposal is actually worth considering. Now, it is also important to state here that it doesn't mean that you have to make sure everything has to be like 100% perfect. Like I used to tell people, if you are going for a master's, you are going because you want to advance your knowledge. So it is not expected that you're already an expert. If you're already an expert, why do you need to do a master's again? And if you're also going for a PhD, it means you're narrowing down your research to become an expert in a particular field as well. So if you're already an expert, you wouldn't bother, doing a PhD in that specific field. So that implies that there is room for improvement in whatever you have come up with, but you must be able to demonstrate that you know what you are doing and you are able to come up with a very good proposal. Secondly, is the feasibility of the research you're proposing. How feasible is it? How can we be so sure that you'll be able to do it? Now, these are some of the things we'll still talk about a little bit as we dive into the session. And the next point is that, do you have a clear internal logic? And what this implies is that, do you have questions that are related together? You don't want to come up with a research proposal where your first question is in direction A, your second question is in direction Z, and your last question is in direction U. Those are kind of disjointed research, and it doesn't help you to kind of bring everything together, because in the long run, you're going to be bringing all the research questions together to form a theme that would be used either in your dissertation or in your thesis. So it is important that there's a high level of cohesion within your proposal. Secondly, are you writing for an admissions committee for evaluation? So if this is the point, if this is the objective, then feasibility is very important as well, which implies that how can they trust you that you can do that research? You need to show or prove that they can actually trust you. They should have confidence in you that what you are saying is true and you are able to carry it out. That's number one. Secondly, originality and knowledge gap is important, because in front of the admissions committee will be a lot of proposals. So how will your own stand out in terms of originality? Are you trying to repeat something that somebody else has done elsewhere, or are you able to pinpoint a knowledge gap that your study is going to fill. The third thing that is important here also is the institutional fit. And this simply implies that if you are saying you want to do a research, for example, if you are applying to a particular university and you are interested in studying in an institute that focuses on environment, and you are writing a proposal that has to do with maybe agricultural technology or something that is outside that scope, there will be no institutional fit in that regard. So you want to make sure that your proposal fits, the institution that you are actually applying to. And thirdly, it may also be that you are applying to a scholarship whereby your proposal is going to be reviewed by a scholarship committee. And if this is the case, then the intellectual merit of your proposal is very important, which means what will be your contribution to knowledge? What are you aiming to contribute to knowledge? Feasibility and methodological rigor is also important in this scenario as well. But one other extra layer that this type of scholarship committees consider is the broader impact. What does the society stand to gain by, from conducting this research? When you do this research, what will be the benefit to the society? Now, I also like to mention here that it doesn't mean that all these three listed points are the only things that are important for each of these categories. In fact, this can all be mixed into a one big bucket whereby you want to make sure that all these points are considered when you are developing your proposal. Now, once we know who is going to read our proposal, the next thing is, okay, now we want to try to develop the proposal. What is the first thing? The first thing is that when you submit your proposal, the first thing the evaluator sees is your title. Your title is very, very important. And why is your title important? Your title is important because it gives the first impression about your work. Then it is also a means of attracting evaluators to your work, like, oh, this title looks interesting. I hope this proposal is going to be a good read. Something like that. So the first impression is very important. Now, secondly, your title is very important because it tells the evaluator about the scope of your work. And from that title, it is easy for them to pass a first level kind of assessment to be like, oh, will this work actually fall within the scope of what we plan to fund, or what we are doing in my lab, or what the scholarship vision is. So the title is able to communicate to whoever is evaluating your proposal about the scope of your work. So it is very, very important. And next is that even after professors or admission committees review a lot of proposals, it is very unlikely that they are going to remember the names of everybody that has submitted a proposal. But one thing that they can easily remember is perhaps the title of a particular proposal that is interesting, or perhaps some kind of keywords that are very interesting in a particular proposal. And it could be the case that evaluators need to argue for any proposal they think is worthy of funding, where they need to provide justification. So in that situation, the title of your proposal can be very helpful because it makes it easy for them to remember, rather than going back and sorting through the voluminous number of proposals that has been submitted for consideration. So in essence, your title is very important. Now let's see one or two examples of titles, and we can try to evaluate whether it's a good one. Now, if I write a proposal and the title of my proposal is Roots and Soil, even though you are not a plant scientist, if you see that this proposal is about root and soil, then you start to ask different questions. What is it about root? What is it about soil? What is the researcher trying to do? So it means that the title is too vague because what I want to test is not clear. So, that first impression is even a wrong one. I'm giving a wrong impression in the first instance. So everybody that looks at my proposal in the first instance will be like, root and soil, how do we understand what you're trying to do? Another example is if I write a proposal, like put the title as measuring plant height in 10 species. Okay, yes, I want to measure the height of different plants in 10 different species of plant. Okay, so what about it? What am I going to do with those heights? What is going to happen to them? So that looks like a chore, like you just want to, go to the field and keep doing some exercise by measuring plants. Now let's see this third one that says that variation in the root traits of invasive and native species, implications for restoration. Now, for some of us that are not familiar with these terms, I decided to choose this because I think it's going to be easy. So see an invasive species as something like a weed, which are plants that grow in an unwanted place, and all those definitions that we know. And a native plant is like a normal plant, a plant that we are used to seeing in our environment, like they live in our environment. We know they are common in our environment. So the weeds are like the invasive species. So in this title, I'm trying to say that I want to look at the differences between the characteristics of plants that are common in our environment and those that are weeds, which we don't want. Then what is the implication of knowing these differences for restoration? And restoration simply implies that if you have a land that is already degraded and you're trying to bring them back so that you can have more plants, inhabiting that kind of land. You'll see that in these three examples, the third one is much more clearer. By reading that, you are able to, develop a mindset about what I'm trying to do. So which could actually, give a good impression about my proposal in the first instance. So the title is important, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the next thing is, after you must have, even though your title is not the first thing you probably craft, but we're going to go in that, in that order. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the background information or statement of the problem. I put these two because statement of the problem, I think, is something that is much more common in the social sciences. So background information maybe for the sciences, or it could also be like introduction. Now, why is this, part of the proposal important? It is important because the background information or statement of the problem demonstrates your competence in the field. And what do I mean by this is that it helps to establish you as an authority. Not that you have become a professor, but that you know what is going on in this field. You know what research has been conducted in this field. So that providing background information is a way to show whoever is reading that, oh, I actually know the trend of research, how research has evolved in this field. Secondly, it serves as a logical roadmap for your proposal. And what this implies is that it will show that whatever hypothesis you are coming up with later is not just jumping from the sky, because you must have built the arguments right from your first sentence in the background information, trying to explain or trying to discuss what has evolved in the field, up to the level of identifying what the knowledge gap you are trying to fill is, and as you also advance in the proposal development. So your background information is very important. Now, thirdly, it will also help you to establish the knowledge gap that you are trying to fill. Now, there's no way you want to prove to an evaluator that your research is new if you are not able to show that you know where the old research has ended, or you know where the current research has stopped. For example, if let's say, for example, I'm trying to talk about the evolution of how people use different grasses to feed animals. Let's say, for example, in Nigeria, I should be able to go, as far back as I know about how it started, what are the new inventions that has been developed, up to the level of, okay, this is the current state of knowledge in this field. Then that gives me the opportunity to now say, even though we have known all this, but we still lack knowledge about A, B, and C, which is why I'm writing this proposal to fill this knowledge gap. So let's see one or two examples of this as well. This example is just to show you possible ways you can actually anchor, your background information. For example, saying previous work focused on characteristics of leaves is what I mean by leaf traits. Leaving a critical gap in our understanding of root kinetics. Root kinetics means the characteristics of the roots, which means most research are focused on studying the leaves, but we do not really know a lot about what is happening in the root system. One of my motivations for taking my research below ground. Another example is research on household income in Nigeria shows ABC. However, we still lack knowledge on XYZ. This is showing that, yes, I have a good grasp of, research on household income in Nigeria. I know what is obtainable. I know what has been, what the previous findings are. But now I am also showing that we lack knowledge in this area, and I want to develop this area by conducting this specific research. The next section we're going to look at is the literature review or the theoretical framework. Now, this is not something that will be common for all proposals. You'll remember I mentioned when I started that you need to follow the format provided by whoever you are, submitting the proposal to. Although in the case of submitting a proposal to a PI, there may not be a format, but your research field should also be a very good guide regarding that. So if you have to include literature review of theoretical framework, this is a way to show that you are very conversant with the literature in your field. You know what previous studies have done. It's also a way to pinpoint the knowledge gap that you are going to address in your work. And the theoretical framework is a way to show that this work we are proposing falls within a particular theory in your field. And you'll be able to explain that theory, provide background information about that theory, how people have applied that theory, what they have found out, and what is left to be known that can actually be beneficial by conducting your own specific research. So the literature review or the theoretical framework is not something that is probably always included in the in the research proposal. But I think the theoretical framework is more common for people in social sciences. A lot of people in social sciences deal with theoretical framework. Now, the next section we're going to talk about is why do you want to do this research? Justifications, your aim, your objectives. Now, you need to justify why your research is important. What will science or society benefit from your work? What do the community, the wider audience stand to gain from your work? And I'll give a typical example here. I mentioned about weeds the other time. It is important. Let us imagine that we all have a garden. We all have a garden in our house. And in this garden, we have planted some very good plants. We are able to use food, various groups. But all of a sudden, we started noticing that we have weeds in this garden that are getting up to like 50% of our whole garden. So these weeds, it means that they are taking up the space that the plants that we're supposed to use for food they are taking up the space from those plants, which is not good for us. Now, if we have somebody that come to us and be like, hey, I can actually conduct a research to look at the characteristics of these two types of plants and be able to come up with an idea of how you can manage these weeds so you can eradicate them and be able to fill their space with the desired plants that will produce food for you. I believe we will all be interested in that kind of proposal because the money we're going to spend to probably give that person to conduct that research is going to be far lesser than doing trial and error trying to control those weeds. For example, you went to the market, you bought chemicals today, you spray, they didn't go. The next time you also pick up a rake, you raked it, but after a while they also come back. So which means you need to really understand what is going on, which you can actually solve, through a research. So that's one way of, clearly justifying why your work is very important. Secondly, what is your aim? So what are the deliverables? For example, in this instance, I will say that I want to know the difference between a weedy plant and a native plant and how this relates to, managing, this garden that I have. So I can continue to have plants that will keep producing food for me. That is a way to show the aims of my proposal. And the objective is like, what will I do? In essence, what will you do? So to show my objective, I'm going to measure the height of these weedy plants. I'll also measure the height of these invasive plants and compare them. And as a result of that, I'm going to be able to come up with, some ideas on how we can, manage these weedy plants. So this is just a kind of hypothetical example of how you can provide justifications or aims and objectives for your proposal. Now, research questions. This is very, very important in whatever proposal we're developing, because it may even be that the evaluators or the committee don't have a lot of time to read from A to Z in the proposal, but they will definitely be interested in the questions that we ask. Now I'm going to turn it over to the audience and ask a simple question here. So which one do you think is better? Kindly use the chat box, please. Do you think it is better to ask a broad question, or to ask a narrow question? I'd like to see some answers. Good, narrow question, okay. I only have one response. Can you try to respond, please? Which one do you think is better, to ask a broad question or a narrow question? Okay, it looks like narrow is taking all the votes. Nobody's interested in a broad question. Wow. I like this. Narrow question also has to be focused. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, now let's dive in. So when you ask yourself, like, should you ask a broad or narrow question? The two of them have implications. But I'll say that when you ask two broad questions, it may be untestable. And what do I mean by untestable is that it becomes so broad that you even lose focus. You don't even know what exactly you are trying to do. So in that instance, it's telling you that asking two broad questions is not good. But on the other hand, if your question is also too narrow, it may be boring. Because you remember I mentioned something the other time, that you are trying to spark the flame of scientific inquiry. And for you to achieve that, you need to be somewhere in between, so that you can have a question that allows you to capture sufficient information, but narrow enough for you to be able to stay focused. Thank you very much to everyone that responded to the question. Now, again, I'm going to turn it over and ask you this. Would you prefer to ask a descriptive or mechanistic question? Which one would you prefer? Fortunately, I don't seem to see my screen again. Sorry. Okay, descriptive, okay. Descriptive, okay. All right. So, descriptive versus mechanistic questions. Let's see what the difference is. So when we ask a descriptive question, it usually leads to a yes or no response. You are simply asking what happens. For example, is there a difference in the height of male and female individuals? Or is there a difference in the weight of male and female individuals? Usually this kind of question may not be very interesting to researchers. However, if you are asking another type of question that is mechanistic, this kind of question seeks to understand how or why you are getting a particular response. For example, it could be that, okay, if I see that there's a difference in variables A and B, so why am I seeing that difference? What could be the reason why I'm seeing that difference? That way it allows you to probe deeper to identify possible mechanisms underlying a particular response that you are seeing in your study, that you are seeing in a variable. And by so doing, you will be able to have a deeper understanding of the particular system that you're studying. Now, one of the concepts I like in trying to put forward a proposal is what I call the logic chain. And what does this logic chain mean? Number one is that you have the question. The question helps you to clearly explain how knowledge gap, is to be filled by your study. What knowledge gap are you feeling in your study? We have that question. Number two, you should be able to put forward a hypothesis. What are you predicting based on the literature and your background knowledge in the field? So what are you predicting will happen? Are you predicting that A is going to be positively related to B, or A is going to be negatively related to B? So there should be some level of prediction when you come up with your question. Now, after that hypothesis, the next thing is the mechanism. You should be able to justify or provide some additional information on the possible mechanism that is driving your hypothesis. Remember, this possible mechanism will have become evident because you have provided a background information in your proposal where you explored what has been done in the literature before. So the mechanism could be that you're trying to explain the biological, physical, ecological, or socioeconomic reasoning driving the hypothesis. Then the fourth is the data. So what will you measure to support or disprove your hypothesis? How are you going to show that your hypothesis is either supported or disproved? So if you are using this kind of framework, it can be very helpful to clearly articulate what you are trying to do in the proposal. And I even imagine that if a professor or a committee only goes through this section, it will be very clear for them to understand what exactly you are trying to do and possibly why you are doing it. Now let's see an example of how this can work out. Now for the question, I can ask a question like, why do certain weeds take over a garden or field so much faster than the local plants that have lived there for a long time, centuries, millennia, and stuff like that? And my hypothesis could be like, weedy plants outcompete native plants because they grow faster. That is a good reasoning, right? Then the mechanism could be that, weedy plants actually utilize more resources efficiently than native plants, so which supports their faster growth and competitive superiority. Then for the data, I could say, okay, I'm going to collect data on plant height, how much surface of the ground is covered by each type of plants, how much big the area of the leaf is, because that is related to photosynthesis and things like that. Now, it doesn't mean that because I put forward this hypothesis and mechanism, that whatever data I'm going to collect after conducting my experiment must follow this trend. No, it can be supported and it may not be supported. So there are two different routes to it. But at least this will give whoever is reading my proposal an idea of, this person actually knows what he's doing, and he also understands the possible mechanism, that is guiding the hypothesis he or she is putting forward. Next, let's look at the whole integration. Now, the first thing we're going to look at here is how many questions should your proposal have? Because I'm using two screens, I'm not able to see the responses, but I appreciate if you can unmute and just say, and probably say it. So how many questions should you have in a proposal? I don't want to be changing my screen. Let me see. Okay, somebody's talking. Please go ahead. How many questions?
I think it largely depends on the level of the research. Possibly, if it's masters, around 3.
Okay.
Going to PhD, it might be around 5 also.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Any other opinion on that, please? Any other opinion?
Depending on the number of objectives, the objectives of the research.
Okay.
We determine the questions.
All right. Well, I think we probably have two categories of participants. Broadly, let me say that whether you are intending to be a master's or PhD, so it depends. Yes, I agree with everybody that I've spoken that it depends on the level of the research. It also depends on whether you're writing the proposal for a master's or a PhD work. So for masters, somebody said 3, that is fine. But I also think minimum of 2 is fine. Because even when you have 2 questions, it is possible that you have more than one hypothesis under each of the questions. So you could still end up doing a lot of work, even though you have 2 questions. For example, maybe your first question has maybe 1 or 2 hypotheses. Maybe your second question has like 3 hypotheses. That is enough to, get your dissertation already. And for PhD, I would say probably the minimum should be 3. And also remember that having 3 questions does not mean you only have 3 hypotheses. The hypothesis can be more than 3. But I've seen people have 4 or 5. Myself, my PhD, I have 4 questions in my PhD, which resulted in 4 different chapters. But by and large, we also need to understand that writing these proposals sometimes doesn't really mean that it is what you are, going to stick to, verbatimly. Let me put it that way. It could be that the professor actually want to know whether you have the ability to process your thoughts and put them into writing for an effective communication. Let's assume that I have a position that I'm advertising, and I advertise it and I say, okay, fine, you need to develop a proposal in this area. After I develop the proposal, it's related to what I want to do, but maybe I already have a project in mind. But that will show me that, you can actually, get trained Probably you only need a little bit of push and improvement for you to become better. So that kind of candidate can be a better candidate. And I remember when I applied for a scholarship that funded my PhD, I also wrote a proposal, but I did not end up, doing what I actually wrote in the proposal. But I remember I wrote the proposal then. So all I'm saying is that when you get the opportunity to write a proposal, do it right. Don't have a feeling like you don't even know what is going to happen. Yes, you don't know. And when you have one proposal, it also makes it easy for you if you need to apply to another place. Maybe you are going to try to adapt the proposal to a new question or something like that, provided it is within your larger field of research. Now, secondly, are your objectives linked to each other? This is the internal logic I mentioned when we started the webinar. So you want to have questions that are linked to each other. You don't want to have disjointed questions. If you submit disjointed questions to a professor, they might feel like you probably don't really understand, because the question that will come to mind is, okay, you have 3 different questions in 3 different research directions. So where exactly do you want to specialize? So you are not actually showing convergence. So there should be some level of convergence, showing that, okay, you're trying to develop your expertise in this area. So your questions should also, revolve around those areas more broadly. Then, conceptual framework is something that can be very helpful for you when you develop your proposal. And what do I mean by conceptual framework is you are trying to help the evaluators visually see the idea you are trying to put in front of them. So, for example, how is A linked to B? How is B linked to C? You probably have like 4 or 5 or let's say 6 variables that you're going to measure in your proposed research. How are these variables related? What do you expect to happen to these variables? You can actually present that in a conceptual framework. And with that, let's look at an example of conceptual framework. So I took this from this paper where they're trying to show the connection between like the public sector, individuals, and the community. You can see that they are trying to show us that for the public sector, they can actually proceed in 2 ways. They can either be, the NGOs can feed into the public sector, the community and the associated institutional rules and norms can also feed into the public sector. While if you look at the NGO and the commercial entities towards the middle, they both feed into the community. So this is a kind of conceptual framework that is showing you like this is the possible way things can work out in this research that I'm proposing. And it's usually a very good thing to do because it helps whoever is evaluating to be able to paint a mental picture of whatever you are saying, aside from reading the text. Here's another example that is more related to my field though, but I'm going to try to break that down. So this is showing that, okay, when we look at the root of plants below ground, we definitely have 2 different axes of variation where it is either a root is very long and it is not going to be thick, and that is the blue line you are seeing. That if a root is very long, which has the do-it-yourself approach, then it is not going to be thick because this longevity and this thickness that you are seeing, they are on opposite sides of the arrow. We call it specific root length. Now, it is also either that a root, the root of a plant is very fast by having a lot of nitrogen content, or it is going to be slow by having a thick root tissue density, by having a lot of tissue density below ground. So this is a kind of conceptual framework that gives you an idea of, oh, okay, this is the possible way that this thing can work out. But, whatever you find out may not necessarily, follow this conceptual, framework. It can follow it strictly. There could be some level of deviation and the likes. So when we move away from the conceptual framework, we move into the method. And this is also a very important section of your proposal. You want to be able to show how you are going to do your research, what is going to happen. So some of the things you are going to talk about here is perhaps your study sites, things like your experimental design. What kind of design are you going to use? How will you collect the data? What kind of data do you want to collect? These are important information that you need to include in the method section of your proposal. On top of that, if you're a social scientist, you also want to talk about whether you are going to be using household survey, what is your sample size, and if you are doing an experimental research, what are your possible treatments, the treatments you are considering in your proposal. And by explaining all these things, it also helps whoever is reading your proposal to see whether how much feasible this research you are proposing will be. Then you can also talk about things like questionnaire. If you're a social scientist, how do you want to administer it? What kind of questionnaire are you administering? Who are your survey respondents? How will you select the respondent? What is your process of selecting them? And more importantly is the analytical approach. How will you analyze the data? For every research proposal you put forward, there must be data collection in the process. Now, when you collect the data, how do you intend to analyze it? You should be able to demonstrate how you want to analyze the data, because that is going to tell whoever is reviewing your proposal on, it's not just about collecting data, it's about collecting data and knowing what to do with it so as to get to be able to address the questions that you have put forward. Now, let's quickly talk about project feasibility. You need a proof of concept, and the proof of concept simply is a preliminary data that demonstrate the feasibility of the proposed research. Now, this is something that is very important if you are able to provide it, because it helps you to convince the PI or the committee that your proposal is worthy of consideration. And why is that? This simply implies that, imagine that I'm submitting a proposal to you that, okay, I want to do a study on 4 different plant species. And for this plant species, I want to do a very big study for my PhD, for example. But I've actually done a small study on these 4 species before, and this is the data set that I collected. This is the trend that I saw, when I analyzed that data set. Now, this is going to give you an impression that, oh, this person actually wants to do this big work, but he has done a smaller version of this work before, and he's also able to show me the data generated from that effort. So this implies that most definitely this person will be able to conduct this research. Even though it's on a larger scale, he has done it before. All he needs is just to scale it up and blow it up a little bit to be able to achieve that. So, and I know some of the questions that may come to your mind is, how do I get proof of concept? Like, how do I get data? Have I done any research before? Where do I get this data set from? It could be that the proposal you're trying to write stems probably or is related to what you have done during your undergraduate research. You can easily take, get a figure out of your undergraduate work because it's your work. So you can use it as a proof of concept. You understand? Then if you have not done that, maybe you have collaborated with other people in publishing a paper, you can also use it, provided that paper has your name as a co-author. You just need to, you can also, it's important ethically to talk to your co-authors that you are actually trying to use this, in your proposal. It should not be a very, big deal like that, but you need to let them know that you want to use this, part of your publication in your proposal, just to pitch your idea to, to the funders. So, being able to do this, being able to do this can actually increase your chances, because it will demonstrate that, oh, this person stands out actually because you wanted, and it's also something you can do deliberately. You understand? Depending on whether it is feasible for you on that scale or not. I do understand that it may not be feasible for everyone. You understand? But if it's something that is visible, you can do a small scale experiment. Maybe you are still doing your master's and you're trying to, develop a proposal for PhD. From your master's work, if it's related, you can just, analyze the small data and a very small one and just show that, oh, okay, this is what I've done before and it's very much related to what I want to do next. So, and you could also do this by maybe pointing to some of the publications you've had before. That is another way to show proof of concept, like, I want to do this research in this area and I have published 1 or 2 papers in this area. This is the major findings I got from that work, and this is how the present proposal I'm writing or I'm submitting. This is how it will build off, or it will build on, the previous work that I've published in this area. Now, timeline is very important also. You want to be able to give a timeline of when, or let me say, how the research is going to be conducted. So using the Gantt chart which is a graphical roadmap that shows key milestones in the project, like what are you going to do first, what will be the second thing, what will be the third thing. Again, this may not be necessary depending on the format you are expected to use, except that perhaps if you are submitting to a professor and you just feel like, okay, you want to show them that you are proposing three different questions or 2 questions, and maybe if they accept you to their lab, you're expected to spend 2 years to complete your study. So this kind of Gantt chart can be useful to say, okay, from within the first 6 months, this is what I'll do. Within the second 6 months, this is what I'll do. The third 6 months, this is what I'll do. The fourth 6 months, this is what I'll do. So it shows your roadmap from entry all the way to graduation. Like, this is how I plan to spend my time in your lab and the activities that I'll be doing during those times. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about very quickly is visual signposting. And what do I mean by this? Proposals can have different lengths, but it's also common, and it's also something that is possible. Let me not say common. It's also something that is feasible that, evaluators can be like, let me just even skim read this proposal and see what is going on. So you may want to use bold text, for example, to indicate your questions. For example, to indicate your hypothesis. For example, to indicate something like maybe the analysis you are going to do, a particular approach of analysis, or a particular software that is very important to the work you are developing. So it makes it easy for the evaluators when they are reading through. Once you use bold text, it's easy to attract their attention, and they can easily, skim through that side and see whatever you are talking about. The same thing goes for using italics. It can also attract attention, and the same thing applies to using bullet points to kind of list, especially when you are listing the research questions you are trying to, address. It makes it easy for evaluators to clearly see the questions and how they are kind of linked together, even though they are separate questions that you are trying to ask in the proposal. So visual signposting is something that is, I think, is very good. That can be very helpful for you when developing your proposal. Now, strategic alignment. Here, I want to quickly talk about how you should, use some of these 3 cardinal points to kind of drive home your points. Now, let us assume that you are writing to a professor. You want to join their lab. Now, when you write your proposal, you want to use keywords that are relevant to their own research. You don't want to use keywords that are not, that are very far from what they do, because that way, it will probably show that your research and their research will probably be out of sync, and that is not a good indicator. So you should use relevant keywords, and not only for professor. Okay, let's take it in that order. Now, for admissions committee, you also want to use relevant keywords that is related to their goals. We talk about institutional fit the other time. So you want to use keywords that is related to their goals. And for scholarship committee, you also want to use keywords that is related to their mission statement. What is their mission? What is it that is their big, dream, or the big thing they are trying to achieve as a scholarship body? So you want to use keywords that are relevant to that. Now, for scope, for example, if you're applying to a professor who is, animal science field is also broad. Let me use that as an example. But maybe that professor is focusing on animal welfare, and you are, focusing on maybe ruminant nutrition. That is not related to each other. Of course, there could be a way to connect them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that professor will have expertise in that ruminant nutrition area. So you want to be sure that the scope of your proposal fits well to whether a professor's research program or the university that you are applying to, or the funding, or the scholarship committee that is going to look at your work. So the scope is something that is that is very, very important. So don't write out of scope. Make sure you are within that scope. And that is why when you're applying for different scholarship applications, it is important that you read about those scholarships. Don't just use a generic document for everything. Read about the scholarship, know what they are trying to achieve, know what their mission is, know what their vision is. So that way, you will be able to incorporate that into your proposal, and it can increase your chances. Now, mutuality implies that how will your own success help them achieve their goals? For example, if you are joining a lab, I remember the first postdoc I had, the professor was asking me, what kind of research do you want to come and conduct in my lab? So you should be able to demonstrate how your own success with the proposal will also help them achieve their goals. If you join a professor's lab, you come to their lab, you implement the proposal, you conduct the experiment, how will that be helpful to them? What will be their own, their own gain? What do they start to gain by you joining their lab? So you should be able to demonstrate that in the proposal. The same thing goes for the admissions committee. If the university gives you admission, how will you, contribute to that university's mission and vision? And the same thing goes for the scholarship committee. So integrating this into your proposal is something that is very important, and it can actually be very helpful in increasing your chances to get selected. Now, to wrap it up, we're going to talk about originality first. Now, as a recap, when you are developing your research proposal, try to challenge the status quo. Don't just follow trends. Challenge the trends or apply the trends, in a new context. So don't just try to repeat what other people have done. You should be able to bring in new perspectives to the research domain. And this is why you probably need to know how to conceptualize a research in the first instance, so that will be a very good building block to developing, your proposal. So originality is very, very important. You don't want to, just copy from somewhere or, try to repeat what other people have done without adding any context or without adding any improvements. That is not going to be helpful, because the essence of doing a research in the first instance is for you to contribute to knowledge. So if you are repeating what other people have done before, you are definitely not contributing anything to knowledge. You are only repeating it. So you want to be at the frontiers of research in your field. If that is your aim, then you need to bring in fresh perspectives on how things can be done. Then secondly is that preliminary data is very, is very important and key. But I also understand that it's possible that not all of us will have preliminary data. But if you have publications, as I mentioned earlier, that could also serve in this regard. And it can really increase, the evaluator's confidence in your proposal that yes, this person is able to show that they have done something similar to this proposal that they are writing. So definitely they should be able to, conduct this study. And the preliminary data can come from different sources, as I mentioned. It could be that you are able to do some research by yourself. It could be, point from maybe your previous thesis, whether undergraduate project or your master's thesis, or it could be that you have collaborated with people and you are able to use, those kind of publications as preliminary data that, that you've done something similar in that field. And finally, the broad impact is something that is also very important. And this implies that you have to think beyond the lab, at least in the case of the professor. You have to think beyond, like, when you come into the lab, if they accept you, if your proposal gets in, what does the lab start to get by you joining them? How will your research benefit students, the industry, or the wider community? So what will be the impact of your student? How will it, bring improvements to whether people's life, whether the environment, or whatever research niche that you're working on? There should be a way to find out your broader impact so that they'll see that, oh, it's actually important to conduct this research. Therefore, the need to fund this research, cannot be overemphasized. Then this proposal should be, selected for funding. And with this, I'll say thank you for your attention and take all questions you have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Saheed, for the wonderful session. You've shed more light for us on how to navigate writing a strong research proposal for graduate study, and we really appreciate your time, energy, and effort put into this. Thank you so much, sir. So please, if you have any question and you want to unmute yourself, please just raise up your hand, or if you want to drop your question in the chat box. Thank you. For me, I have a question, sir, since nobody's doing that right now.
Okay.
So my question goes thus. Now that we are in the era of artificial intelligence, like AI, like ChatGPT and all those kind of stuff, is it strongly recommended that we use those available tools to conceptualize our research ideas?
I think it's fine if it's for conceptualizing, because by conceptualization, you simply implies you are trying to develop the idea you will probably write into a proposal. I think that is fine. I think I've seen a couple of professors, say that, they can kind of brainstorm with AI and, try to, especially if you want to try to ask like, what is the leading edge of research in your field? They can be very useful to point you at the leading edge of research, but you need to do your own work. For example, if you go online and you be like, okay, what is the leading research, frontier in animal breeding and genetics? And AI is able to tell you, okay, these are the 3 or 5 leading areas. You can also ask it to suggest some, papers for you. So when that is done and you are able to get those leading papers and things like that, you should now do your own work by reading those papers yourself. You need to get those papers, read them. You don't just take that information and just use it that way. So you need to sit down. That's just like helping you to sift through millions of articles that can be useful for you to conceptualize your idea, but you don't have to, transfer your workload to the AI itself and say, so you are not going to do anything. No. So you get those papers, then read by yourself, then it helps you to understand why the AI even probably suggested that. And, like all these AI developers used to say too, they can be misleading, they can be, sometimes not 100% accurate. So you don't want to just put all your eggs in that and be like, because you get this from AI, that is what you are going to pursue. So for conceptualization, I think it's fine. It's, to me, the interpretation is brainstorming with AI on, maybe why, your research is important, or the leading edge of research. What are the most prominent papers in a particular field? How can you leverage these papers to develop new ideas? What is the next, research frontier in a particular field? I think that should be fine.
Thank you so much, sir. So Habib Muaina, you can unmute yourself to ask a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Jima, for the wonderful insightful talk about research proposal writing. Yeah, I just have a very brief question about the strategic alignment. And if I am writing, for instance, I'm writing for a PI or a consortium or admission committee or whatever, it is very possible that this PI has a research or a career direction already, or the consortium or the organization or the committee has an objective, as you have mentioned earlier. Should I now write the proposal to stylishly, update, logically streamlined, such that it aligns or fits these biases, these known biases, in the sense that maybe I am not really interested in that research, but for the fact that I'm looking for a scholarship or admission or something. So maybe I can find a way to transition or find some words to make my current research, fits into what they want to do, so that I can get it funded or get it approved or accepted, so I can start something, because maybe I need a PhD offer or a MSc position or something. So is this advisable to, do something like this? Maybe you're not really very interested in that research, but you think, okay, let me just get this now, and maybe it will grow on me, or I will develop the interest as time goes on or something. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, that's a very good question. And I must tell you, it's something that is risky. That is why you are writing a proposal. I must tell you. Because even in the field where you are interested, you can never be so sure. You can never be so sure that things will go the way you have planned it. And from my experience, especially if you are going for a PhD, it doesn't always go the way you planned it. So the idea of, can I write a paper just because I want funding from these people? Now, think about the work you have to put in for you to even be able to come up with that proposal. Is it worth your effort to put in the proposal when you are not really interested? You understand? Now, I also understand the fact that sometimes you think that, oh, this program is ending, I need to get another program. And, maybe it's slightly different from what I'm doing, especially if you're moving from master's to PhD. That is fine. But you also need to prepare your mind. Now, if this works through, am I really ready to develop my expertise in this area? If you are not ready to deviate to that area, I don't think it's going to be worthwhile. One, because if you write a proposal and it gets funded, and along the way, if you defunct, it's going to affect you. It's your integrity that is at stake. You do need to understand that. And that is something that is very important. Because if any funding agency should signpost anybody that these people, and that's the essence that when you get funded, especially for funding organizations, they will say you should provide a report after you finish the research. You understand? So you need to look at what are the pros and cons. What do you need to do? So first thing is to read. For any proposal you need to submit, you really need to read about it. There will be some level of information about the proposal. So read about it, then digest it and see what should be my next line of action. Should I go ahead to apply? You understand? Now, in the case that you are thinking, not really too much interested in this, but it looks promising, it looks good. What should I do? Okay, let me give it a try. I'm giving it a try, but with at the back of my mind that if this goes through, then I'll commit to it. Do you get my point, Mr. Abib? With the hope that, yes, if this goes through,
Yes,
then I'm
sir.
going to commit to it. Do you understand? Not with the mind that, oh, even if it goes through, I'm not interested in it, so I'm not going to do it very well. I'll just do it the way I like. No, don't ever go into it with that mindset. Do you understand? Because you never know who is watching. So whatever you need to do, please do it well. You understand? If it's because opportunities are constrained, I believe there will be a lot of avenues that you can explore. And also note that funding, you writing a proposal and getting through is very competitive now. So you need to really decide before you kind of push it forward that you want to do it. So whatever you are going to do, make sure you are doing it well. That will be my, overall response to that. I hope that is helpful.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
So we have another person raising his or her hand. Mustafa Al-Hakim. Al-Qasim, are you with us? If yes, please unmute yourself to ask your question.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, sir. Even though I came late, I wasn't around in the beginning of this presentation, but there is something which I need more clarification on. That is when you are mentioning about the originality. You made mention of applying all methods to different contents. So I need more light on this part. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Yeah, so what that simply implies is that, let us say, for instance, I'm trying to conduct a study in Nigeria. Now, I came across a paper where they have, or let's say a study, where they have used a particular method to maybe study animals or study plants, maybe resistant to disease. Let's say, just hypothetical, let's say maybe in the US, Australia, or Europe. So I can develop a proposal to apply that same method to forages in Nigeria, because it doesn't mean that whatever they find in those developed countries is what I'm going to find in Nigeria. So that is the explanation behind that. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So in that way, I am trying to apply something, a method that has been established somewhere, but I'm applying it in a different context, you understand, to see what is going to happen into my own, system that I'm studying. I don't know if that is clear.
Yes.
So that is the simple explanation with that, and that happens a lot, and that's why you see that is how the literature keeps growing. That is why you see that in the literature you see that somebody applied this method in, let's say, example, Europe, they got a positive response. Then somebody applied it in maybe Cameroon, they got a negative response. Then you can come up and say, oh, there's actually a conflict in the literature because we don't have a unanimous response. Some people have done this in Europe, they've got positive response. Some people have done it in Cameroon, they got a negative response, which means this issue is not yet resolved. So we still need more studies to understand this particular area of research. And that is why I'm writing this proposal to further investigate this and see what is going to happen.
Thank
Do
you,
you
sir.
understand, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So thank you so much, Dr. Said, for that.
There's a question in the chat box.
Okay, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, somebody saying, is there a difference between theoretical and literature review? Yes, I think there is. To my understanding, when you say literature review, you are trying to explore what has been done in a particular research area. You want to familiarize yourself with what is the existing knowledge in a particular field. And I'll give you a typical example. If I say, okay, I want to conduct literature review on this area of research that has to do with forage production in Nigeria. So that means I can go as far back as 1976 when Agishi and all other people and those that taught us forage resources, when they started research, how they started introducing forage species from Australia, how they started domesticating them, how they started the improvement process. That is literature review. Then I can look at that sequentially, how things evolved up to the present level. As at that time, that was not when they started using silage to feed animals. That silage came on board at some point. So that is reviewing literature to see, what is the existing knowledge, what has been done before, what were the findings. That means I'm reviewing literature. Now, if you are talking about theoretical framework, you are still going back to the literature, but you are going to a specific aspect of the literature to look about a particular theory. Now, excuse me, some researchers and philosophers will sit down and think and come up with a theory that, oh, this is the theory that should govern a particular, let's say, mechanism or process. Do you understand? So in that instance, that is much more specific. So theories are more specific, but literature review is broader, is general. When you're looking at theory, okay, let's say the law of thermodynamics now, you can see that as a kind of particular theory. I'll also give you an example. There's a theory in ecology, we call it the co-limitation theory. You understand? Or let me use this one. There's this theory that is more common. They call it the Liebig law of the minimum. And what is the Liebig law of the minimum saying? It is saying that for any system, in any system you find plants, for example, or generally in any system, the most limiting resource is the one that will cause shifts in that system. Do you understand? So what this is saying is that if you are growing a plant, let's say you are growing a plant in your garden, but you have supplied different nutrients to those plants. Now, out of the nutrients you have supplied, now nitrogen is the one that is least, that is most limiting. Do you understand? That is the nutrient that is going to affect that is going to affect the plant productivity. Now, if you try to supply that nitrogen and you increase that nitrogen content such that nitrogen is no more a problem in that system, then another element or nutrient in that system that becomes limiting again will not be the one responsible for whatever you are seeing again. Do you understand? You can see that is not more general in this sense. It is being specific that this is the theory. Do you understand? There's also this theory that says that I think the optimal partitioning theory also, I can't remember the name very well now, but that theory is saying that any part that is also limiting, like plants will allocate more resources to where they think they need it most. Do you understand? So when you talk about, and all these theories are also common in social sciences too. So when you talk about theories, you are talking about a particular segment of a research niche where they try to explain the things that is expected to happen. However, you can conduct your research and see that that thing is actually not happening. Do you understand? But somebody must have worked hard to develop that theory such that it has become acceptable in the scientific community. Is that helpful, please?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, there's another question here. Good evening, sir. What advice would you give to early researchers in Nigeria dealing with the limitations as regards equipment, especially where in competition with our international counterparts, we seem not to measure up, and we tend to keep recycling research due to this limitation? Well, that's a very good point. But I think one way to kind of scale that is to engage in meaningful collaborations. And when I say meaningful collaborations, I mean collaborations where you are interested in learning in the process as well. Do you understand? And I'll give you a typical example. While I was in Nigeria in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, one of my colleagues, saw the opportunity for us to collaborate with well-known researchers in the field of ecology. And, we approached them, we took that opportunity, and that was how we established the Dragnet site in Nigeria. That is Disturbance and Resources, something, I can't remember the name very well. Now, Dragnet is a global research. Dragnet is a global research, right? But we were able to implement it in Nigeria. We established the study site. And that gives us opportunity to work with, senior researchers in the field. In the process of collaborating in that project, we have learned a lot of things. We have become exposed to a lot of things. So that is what we need. That is one way you can scale it up. Intentional collaboration. Intentional collaboration is one way you can do that. And it can happen at different levels, whether at local level or at institutional level. Now, as somebody that is individual, you can actually, look out for opportunities to collaborate with people, but it doesn't mean it's going to come easily. Now, one of the things that can actually help that is to also focus on getting your work published in good and reputable journal outlets. Because number one, when you get your work published in good journal outlets, then it gives you the chance to be invited to review other people's work. That alone can actually help you. And how can it help you is that when you review other people's work, you tend to learn about how the things are done in other parts of the world. In that process, you can also start, upgrading the kind of research that you are doing that will allow you to be able to publish in those kind of journals that have been inviting you to review. That is one. Number two is that collaboration that I'm saying, you also need to talk about the kind of research you are doing. You understand? In this world now, there's this saying now, before they will say it's either you publish or perish, but now they are saying is either you are visible or you are gone. So you can't imagine that if somebody doesn't know what you do, they cannot say they want to collaborate with you. Do you understand? I remember like a few weeks ago, somebody reached out to me from the UK, requesting to have a conversation with me based on the fact that I used to share my research on LinkedIn, the kind of work I do on root traits. And she was like, she would like to have a discussion with me, on a particular research idea and things like that. And we had the discussion. You understand? But if I've not been, putting out what I'm doing, how would somebody in the UK knows that there's somebody, somewhere doing this kind of research? So you need to show what you are doing. And you also need to you don't have to be afraid that people will think that what I'm doing is wrong. The intentionality is what you need. Do you understand? When you keep, showing up, showcasing your research, it is in that process that you also be able to see how things are being done in other parts of the world. Then it's always better to do a very good research that will probably take you a little time, maybe a little more money than just recycling, like you said, because it's not going to be helpful. You understand? So, and these things, they bring a lot of opportunities, honestly. You get to see a lot of opportunities when you try to, put yourself out there as a researcher. You try to be consistent, you try to showcase your work, and you also try to contribute to what other people are doing. And you can actually start that right on LinkedIn. It's easy. It's just about talking about your research. Over time, you see people doing a similar research. They become accustomed to you, you become accustomed to them. They post about their research, you make useful and meaningful comments. The connection starts from there. So if somebody knows that you engage with their post, with the work they are doing, or you even offer, maybe somebody posted that, oh, I did my research and this is how I did it. And you were like, oh, I actually did something similar, but I used this approach and it's also worked. You have added something valuable to that conversation. So if after a few months you are, trying to set up a meeting with that person, like, oh, would you be happy to, discuss research with me and things like that? That person will probably be willing to be like, okay, let's have discussion, let's see. And from there, something can happen. Something good can happen, let me say it, in terms of collaboration. I don't know if my answer is helpful, but we have to be intentional about it. It can also happen at the institutional level, which I think a lot of institutions in Nigeria are also doing. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So
let's go.
How do we measure the long-term societal impact of research beyond citations and general rankings? I think that's something that is easy, in the sense that we can actually look at what industry is that research relevant to. And I'll give a very typical example. Before, in the old days when there were no silages, it simply implies that when you have excess forage during the rainy season, it gets wasted, right? But after some time, we had to do silage came up, and people started conserving forages as silage, as hay, as haylage, and things like that. That is one value addition. That is one societal impact, because by making sure that excess feed resources are converted to silage, people are able to manage resources, and that is also supporting the livestock sector. Yeah, right. Now, given the fact that some people have come up with the idea of silage, it doesn't mean it should stop there. I have a colleague that is, constantly working on how you can improve silage quality. If you are able to get that and maybe patent it or something like that, that is something that can also become adopted by the industry. So there are different pathways to it. It could also come from the area of sensitization. Maybe you conducted a research and you find something that is useful, that you think the best way to make this impactful is to sensitize people about it. Then you try to see how you can implement that sensitization. What are the available platforms that can be useful to sensitize people? It can be in the way of policy recommendation. You understand, where you come up with, you conducted your research and you're able to come up with a policy that is relevant. I understand that there could be there may be some kind of orders along the way to make sure that this gets to the right people. But with tenacity and consistency, it is something that is that is doable. You understand? I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Said. We have a question. Alabi Temitope, please unmute yourself and go straight to the question, because we are running out of time.
Thank you so much. My question is about the research question and methodology. When talking about the number of research questions we should have, so I want to ask, should research questions, should it directly align with the methodology? That's my question.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Because if you have a research question and it's not aligning with the method, then there will be some kind of conflict and problem. Because if let's say, for instance, you are applying to a professor's lab and you have come up with your questions, but the professor found out that the method you are proposing to use to address that question is not correct, that would be like, a red flag, right? So based on that, the answer is yes. The question should be in alignment with the method you want to use. And that will also show that you are conversant with the literature and you also are aware of how things are done in your field. However, there could be some instances where maybe some kind of new method has been developed somewhere that has not been widely tested or that has not been widely accepted in the field. And if that is what you are trying to do, or if that is the route you want to go, then you need to make it clear that you are aware of this old method that is widely acceptable, but you also think that this novel or new method that has just been developed, can also, perform better, and you provide justification for why you think you're considering that. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
So we can take question from Emmanuel Onche. Please, to save time, you can also drop your question in the chat box. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Dr. Said.
Good afternoon.
Also to the presenter as well, the organizer, sorry. And my question is, I just want you to briefly explain conceptual framework. Just in a simple sentences. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, conceptual framework simply implies that you are trying to paint a picture of how your research is motivated. And I'll try to give an example. Let us imagine that I want to study how feeding 3 different types of grasses to the same type of animals can affect productivity. Do you understand now? Now I can come up with a conceptual framework that shows that if I feed this grass A to this animal, I am probably expecting the productivity to be higher because research has shown that this particular grass has a very high crude protein content. Then if I'm feeding grass B to these animals, I would expect moderate level of productivity because that grass only has moderate level of crude protein. And if I'm feeding grass C to these animals, I'm not expecting, like a significant change in their productivity because that grass has, a lower amount of CP, which I think is very important in driving productivity of livestock. Now, this is a concept. Now, okay, I'm feeding 3 types of grasses to these animals. Okay, then I have a kind of preemption of what the productivity should look like. That is a concept. Do you understand? Now, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that everything will turn out the way I've painted it just now. Research will now tell me whether, when I conduct the research, then I'm able to know whether that concept is totally supported or there's slight deviation. Now, let us take an example that after I now conducted that research, I now found that grass A that has high CP and grass B that have moderate CP, they both contributed to the livestock productivity similarly. But grass C actually performed the way I presumed. You know that is not 100% agreement between my conceptual framework and what I actually found out. So in that case, then it gives me the onus to now be like, oh, why will grass B, which I expect to have moderate contribution to livestock productivity, why is it having a similar productivity to grass A? Do you understand? So that will now help me to probe further and try to understand whatever is going on. Is that explanation helpful, Emmanuel?
Yes, sir. Does that mean it is related to expected result?
It could be. Yeah, okay. It could be. But it doesn't mean that you have to see that result that you think should come up. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's just like you giving your reasoning for why you think you want to conduct this research and the motivation for even doing this research that, oh, I have read a lot of literature and I've seen that, okay, when you produce this grass, it has very high CP. You produce this one, it has, moderate CP. You produce this one, it has what? Low CP. Then expectedly, they should not all have the same effect on livestock productivity. You got to. Now, how do you put that into a form? For anybody to read your proposal, to understand, okay, this is mechanism this person is trying to understand. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And if I go back to, let me see, if I go back to the concept now, can you see? Can you still see it?
Yes, yes.
You understand? So it's just like, look at this left-hand side now. They are just trying to paint a picture of how they expect things to be linked to each other. Do you understand? Now, it's a different thing for their data to now follow this strictly or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It looks like...
That's right. Please, can we take last question before we go?
Yeah, it's fine. We can take question. I think there's somebody raising their hand, right?
So we go with, I think, Abdulwahid Ademola.
I think there's one
there with us.
After that.
Okay.
Please go straight to the question. We appreciate it.
Thank you, the organizer and the presenter. My question is that this is the procedure for writing a proposal for professors for graduate school admission. Is it the same procedure for writing proposal for funding agencies?
I would say no, but not a total no. For funding agencies, they always have a kind of guide, just like if you want to submit to a journal, they have a guideline. You understand? So funding agencies usually have a guide on how you develop, how you write the proposal, what they expect to see, probably the titles, the subtitles, what they want you to articulate, and things like that. So it's all about following the exact guide in developing your proposal. But interestingly, some of these things will also be part of that guide. You understand? For example, background information is something that you need to provide, in every proposal, except that the organizers are so stringent that they want you, maybe they are expecting you to write a one-page proposal. So in that situation, it's going to be very, very streamlined, and you have to just follow whatever procedure that have been laid out. So you need to read the proposal guideline for you to know how to develop it. There's no one rule for all situations. I think we have Saidat Adebola Adeniji raising her hand.
Good afternoon, Doc. I just want to ask a question about, for a PhD in plant breeding, can the research question be embedded in the problem statement?
I do think it's better to separate them, because your problem statement is you signposting the gap you are trying to fill. You understand? So you explicitly mentioning that question is not a bad idea, but it should not preclude you clearly stating the questions again in the section for research questions. Do you understand? So which means that you can actually talk about the question in your problem statement, but not in the same way you are going to talk about them in your research question section. Do you understand? Because at the end of the day, for that problem statement, you want the reader to understand that this is what you're actually trying to address. Do you understand? So you can frame the questions in a way that kind of generalizes that this is actually the problem my research is addressing. Then in your research question, then you go further, like deeper, to say like, okay, this is the laid down question that I'm putting forward. Is that helpful?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahid. So since there is no more further questions, we are done with the question and answer question. Mariam, please, are you with us? Mariam Bello.
Yes, sir.
Please, no problem. Please, could you go ahead with the announcement?
Okay, sir.
Please just hold on. Dr. Sai, please, I'm going to present. That will cancel your own presentation. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Thank you. You go ahead, Mariam, please.
Oh, okay, sir. So good day, everyone, and thank you all for joining this webinar session. We really hope it's an enlightening one for everyone of us. So we would like to, from Kusama Concepts, we'd like to briefly mention to us that we'll be having our next June webinar. And this webinar is titled Unlocking Study Opportunities in South Korea. So during this webinar, we'll be having a PhD researcher at one of the top universities in South Korea, where he will be sharing his insight and experience, and also share his study opportunities that are available in South Korea. So this, like I said, this webinar will be holding next month. That will be on the 27th of June at 1 p.m. And of course, it will be on Google Meet. So to register for this webinar, I'll be dropping a link shortly in the chat box, so we can all kindly just click on it and register. Or you could also register by visiting our social media pages at South Concept. So the link will be pasted in our bio. So please do well and register for this upcoming webinar. And thank you once again for joining. And we hope to see you in our forthcoming webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before we call it a day, on behalf of our team, we would like to sincerely appreciate Dr. Saheed Olaide Jima for sparing us part of his precious time to join us today. As I said, on behalf of the team, we would like to appreciate you for your significant contribution to today's webinar titled Mastering Research Proposal Development for Guided Studies. As our guest speakers, we extend our sincere gratitude for your insight and impactful presentation, which I believe has captivated the audience and enriched the knowledge of all our attendees and those that are still going to listen to this webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Saeed, my mentor, and I wish you all the best as you continue to inspire the younger generation and your colleagues. Thank you for joining us today, and may Almighty God ease all your affairs and bless you more than your thought. Thank you for honoring our younger invitation. We are really grateful, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you to all our attendees for joining. So we wish us all a fruitful career as we advance in our different endeavors. Thank you and have a good one.